Hello, welcome to another edition of A Spoonful of HelpDesk. My name is Lisa Smith. In this edition, I want to discuss with you the 3 main questions you will be asked and you should know how to answer if you are ever audited, inspected, or investigated. Very, very important stuff. So let's get going. Question number 1. What made you think you could do it that way? Oh my goodness. That's kind of rude, isn't it? Well, not really. And maybe it won't quite be asked that way. Maybe it will come in the form of, show me where you got the information that led you to this policy or this procedure or this way of doing things. Okay? So perhaps they found that you had an invalid way of doing things and they just want to know like what led you to this. Sort of like, show me the method to your madness. Okay? So that's going to be question 1. And believe me, that's going to be one of the most important questions that you are ever asked if you are audited, inspected, or investigated. Now, why is that so important? And what is that question really all about? Well, the question is really all about establishing something that the auditors and the attorneys call reasonable basis. What is reasonable basis? Well, reasonable basis is knowing where you get your information and why you do the things you do and making sure that your information has come from credible sources. Okay? So if you answer the question as, well, I don't know why we do things that way. When I came to work here, we just kind of did them that way and I never really asked why. I just kind of fell into the groove. Okay, that's not a good answer. Maybe your answer to the question is, well, that's the way we did it at my old job, so when I started working here, I started doing it that way. Okay, why did you do it that way at your old job? Because that's the way they trained me. Okay, that's not a good answer either. Alrighty, how about this one? Well, I called up Sally, who has a business like ours, and said, how do you do this? And Sally said, oh, this is how I do it. So then I just decided to do it like Sally. Wrong answer. That's not going to help you either. Okay? Nobody cares about how Sally did it or how you did it before or anything like that. You need to be able to speak intelligently about why you do the things you do, right? And so how do you do that? Well, number 1, you need to be able to point to your resource library. You need to be able to point to your legal books. You need to be able to point to the statutes where you get your information from. Maybe you do have a resource like HelpDesk where you point to and you say, I got my information out of this resource that I use. Okay? They will look at it and they will say, this looks reasonable, this looks credible. You tried to get your information from a good source that was written by professionals and experts in the industry. Absolutely. So, points for you because you tried. Now, maybe you got it wrong. Maybe you misinterpreted it. Maybe you went to your attorney for advice or your CPA for advice. And maybe, just maybe, they misled you. Maybe they thought they had it right and they didn't. Do you know that I have CPAs and attorneys who come to my classes every week and who sit in my class and are amazed at the things I teach them? It's true. So they don't even know it all. I don't know it all. We're all learning, right? So everyone understands that. Everyone understands that somebody's going to get it wrong occasionally, but the key is to try. So if you have written documentation from your CPA, written documentation from your attorney, you can show that, and that is still considered reasonable basis, even if they got it wrong, even if you got it wrong, right? You tried. So keep that in mind. You want to be able to answer the question. The second question is going to be something along the lines of, do you have written policies and procedures, or show me your written policies and procedures? Okay? So, if you are like a lot of employers who come to my classes, you may not have them. And if you don't have them, then that is going to be high on your to-do list. So you might want to just go ahead and write that down. Why do they want to see that? Well, many reasons. Sometimes it's in the statute, actually. You can look in statutes for HIPAA, for instance, for OSHA, for instance. Just so many. We could just break down the statutes today, but we don't have time. But you can look in many statutes, and it's there, must have policies and procedures. It's not across the board everywhere, but there are guidelines and statutes that basically set you up that if you don't have them, then you've done something wrong. So it may as well be in writing, right? So we know that implied statutes are there, whether or not they're actually in writing. So you have to have them based on decisions that have been made in court cases and the way other statutes read. You've got to have policies and procedures to back them up. You've also got to have them to protect yourself, to show that you provide equal and fair employment to everyone, and so on and so forth. So we know how all that works. You also need to have policies and procedures in writing to show that you are doing everything that you can to obey the law, and that you are training everyone, and that you are trying to establish consistent behavior. In an audit, your consistency patterns will be looked at. And if you have an older business that goes back into the 70s, for instance, the 1970s, then your auditors many times can go back into the 1970s to pull records or to look at consistency patterns and see how you handled certain situations that far back. So think about that as well. If they see a lot of crazy, erratic, inconsistent behavior in some circumstances, then they can refuse to help you at all. They can refuse to give you any of the protections under Section 530, the Safe Harbor Act. They can refuse to reduce penalties and fines. They can really sock it to you, so to speak, right? But if you have written policies and procedures in place that show we thought we were doing it right, so we were doing it this way, and we were training everyone, and we have it in writing, but then we were advised differently, so we started doing it this way, and then we trained everyone to do it this way. We did it that way for a few years, and then we were told we were doing it wrong again, and we started doing it this way, so we rewrote the policy, and we retrained everyone, and we started doing it this way. Now you have established a method and a little bit of a reasoning, or a lot of bit of a reasoning, to the inconsistency that they see there. And it no longer looks like you just make it up as you go along. It's very clear at that point that you are establishing standard operating procedures, and you have clear training records, and you have a method, and you have a thought process, and you just don't throw it together and hope it lands. And you don't do things that way in your business, right? And the auditors can help you with that. So they need to see that you are establishing consistency patterns, okay? And they need to see substance. So it's called substantive consistency, and that means many different things depending upon the audit, but I look at this in the mode of policies and procedures and having standard operating procedures for everything that you do. Okay, so keep that in mind. That's going to be very important. Then the third question that you need to be able to answer is, do you have very consistent reporting habits? So do you send out all of your 1099s? Do you know who needs to receive a 1099? That's a good question. Do you report all of your taxes on time, your 941s? Is every document that you owe to the IRS getting sent in on time? If something is ever requested from you, is it sent in? Do you sort of ignore those things that come in the mail? How consistent are you? How on top of things are you? Kind of goes back as well to what are your policies on handling, certain things, and are you training people to respond quickly and effectively to those important matters as well. So those two things tie in very closely together. So make sure that you have all of those guidelines in place and that everyone is well trained. You have standard operating procedures. Everyone knows what they are. The documentation is there. That you have a good resource library you can immediately point to and pull from. And that no one ever has to look at you and say, really? Bob told you to do it that way? Or really? You just never bothered to look it up? That would be a really sad day. You never ever want to miss the 3 questions on this test. Now, I realize that this can be difficult. I realize that doing all of this research and figuring all of this out can be difficult and time consuming. So here are some of the things that I do. One of my favorite resources is the Payroll Answer Book. It is published by Wolters Kluwer. I use it to develop a lot of my content for my payroll classes. And if you know anything about Wolters Kluwer, you know that they publish all the good stuff that's reliable in the legal world. So take a look at that. You can access that many different ways, but one way is on our website, endaraseminars.com. We do have a store. On the products page, you click on the little blue button and you can find the Payroll Answer Book there. So that's one easy way. On that store, you'll also find the Employment Law Answer Book, also published by Wolters Kluwer. So another very reliable source. Another resource, of course, that I recommend is HelpDesk module for HR professionals. Now, in our HelpDesk HR module, you're going to find policy and procedure manuals for all 50 states. Yes, absolutely all 50 states. You will also find HIPAA compliance module that contains policy and procedure samplings so that you can take and build out your own policy and procedure for HIPAA, which is very helpful. In addition to that, you will find all of the HIPAA privacy and security and enforcement information, breach reporting information, several logs and charts and forms and agreements for business associates and privacy notices and all sorts of wonderful things to make your organization HIPAA compliant as well. In our HR module, you also find EEOC information, FMLA breakdown. You'll find interpretation letters for various FMLA laws that have been called into question over the last several years. So just a lot of really great help that we place on your desk that will relate straight back to audits and investigations and questions that employees or investigators or inspectors might have for you. Something that you also want to keep in mind, just so that you know where I'm coming from, is I do occasionally perform audits for organizations. I'm a third-party auditor. I get called in by usually large insurance companies to take a look at HR items, privacy items, and a lot of times OSHA inspection items. I am usually given anywhere from a 50 to 150 point checklist based on the need, and I will go through and look at various issues and ask these questions. So I am coming at you today with a point of the other side of the desk. Okay, so keep in mind that the more you do to satisfy the auditor, the more that you do to demonstrate good faith, to show that you tried as hard as you could to obey the law, that you did everything possible. That is going to win you a reduction, I should say, in fines and penalties, and maybe will turn your audit into an educational effort. And ultimately, that's what we want it to be, right? So keep those things in mind. This, I'm sure, has been a very helpful edition of A Spoonful of HelpDesk. If you have questions, don't hesitate to give us an email. We would love to be able to help you out with that. We offer a wonderful consultation service that you can read about on our website as well. And until next time, keep calm and employ on. I'm Lisa Smith. Remember, help is on your desk. Have a good day.